The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in Conference Room B at Riverside Middle School, casting harsh shadows across rows of metal folding chairs. Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted her navy blazer and glanced at the wall clock. 7:12 p.m. The monthly school board meeting was already in full swing, filled with the usual suspects. PTA officers in their pressed khakis, concerned mothers clutching color-coordinated planners, and fathers checking their phones between budget discussions. Elena had been principal here for 6 years, long enough to know every face, every concern, and every subtle shift in the room's energy. Tonight felt different, though she couldn't pinpoint why. The heavy doors at the back creaked open, letting in a gust of October air and the distant rumble of a motorcycle engine winding down. Every head turned as a man stepped inside, clearly out of breath and utterly out of place. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a leather jacket over a faded Led Zeppelin t-shirt, dark jeans, and work boots that had seen better decades. His black hair was slightly mussed from the helmet he'd just pulled off, and there was a streak of motor oil on his forearm that he hadn't noticed. He smelled faintly of gasoline and autumn leaves, an oddly appealing combination that somehow managed to cut through the room's stale coffee aroma. "Sorry," he said, his voice gravelly but sincere as he scanned the room. His eyes, a startling shade of green, found a small girl in the third row who was waving frantically at him with barely contained excitement. "Uncle Jake," 12-year-old Sophia whispered loudly, her joy impossible to suppress. Jake Martinez raised his hand in apology to the room, ducked his head, and made his way to the empty chair beside his niece. His large, calloused hands folded awkwardly in his lap as he tried to make himself invisible. Elena didn't miss the way Mrs. Henderson leaned toward her neighbor with a barely concealed whisper. Nor did she miss the disapproving glance from Mr. Patterson, the school board treasurer, who looked at the newcomer as if he were a grease stain on fine upholstery. But she also didn't miss the way Sophia immediately reached for her uncle's hand with complete trust, or how Jake's entire posture softened the moment his niece smiled at him. Elena cleared her throat and continued with the evening's agenda. "Now, as I was saying about our new arts integration program, Jake Martinez hadn't meant to be late. He'd been under the hood of Mrs. Chen's ancient Honda pro bono work because the widow's Social Security barely covered groceries, let alone car repairs. Time had a way of disappearing when he was troubleshooting an engine problem, especially when it meant keeping someone mobile and independent. He hated walking into rooms like this one, filled with people who probably spent more on their monthly coffee budget than he made in a week. People who looked at his oil-stained fingers and assumed they knew everything about him. But Sophia mattered more than his discomfort. She'd been living with him for 8 months now, ever since his sister Maria's death in a car accident had turned both their worlds upside down. As Dr. Vasquez spoke about literacy initiatives and arts funding, Jake found himself genuinely listening. She wasn't like the administrators he remembered from his own school days, people who spoke in corporate buzzwords and seemed more concerned with test scores than actual children. Her voice was warm, confident without being condescending. When she talked about the music program or the after-school tutoring, she sounded like she truly believed these things could change a life. And Jake found himself believing her too. Halfway through the meeting, Elena opened the floor for questions. A man in a pressed polo shirt immediately raised his hand. "What's the school's plan for addressing the declining standardized test scores? I've seen the district reports, and we're falling behind neighboring schools." Jake felt Sophia's hand tighten in his. Elena's expression remained composed as she addressed the concern with thoughtful detail about curriculum adjustments and individualized learning approaches. "We're focusing on the whole child," she concluded. "Academic achievement is important, but so are creativity, critical thinking, and emotional development. When students feel supported and engaged, test scores tend to follow naturally." Before he could stop himself, Jake found his hand in the air. "Yes, mister?" Elena's voice was polite but curious. Jake stood, his heart hammering. "Martinez. Jake Martinez." His voice was steady despite his nerves. "I know I'm new to speaking up at these things, but I wanted to say something." He paused, looking around the room. "I don't really care about test scores. I care that my niece comes home excited about what she learned. I care that she feels safe here, that her teachers listen to her, that she's developing confidence along with her math skills. That's what matters to me." A brief silence settled over the room, broken only by someone shifting in their chair. Elena's eyes never wavered from his face. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez," she said softly. "That perspective is invaluable." Jake sat down, Sophia beaming beside him, and tried to ignore the mixture of surprise and approval rippling through the room. After the meeting, as parents collected their belongings and filed out into the crisp autumn evening, Elena found herself walking toward the back of the room where Jake was helping Sophia pack her backpack. "She talks about you quite a bit," Elena said, approaching them with a gentle smile. Jake looked up, eyebrows raised. "Hopefully good things. She says you make the best breakfast burritos in the county and that you taught her how to change a tire last weekend." Jake chuckled. "She did most of the work. I just held the flashlight and tried not to get in the way." There was a pause as Sophia skipped off to say goodbye to her friend by the door. "I appreciated what you said tonight," Elena continued. "It reminded me why I chose this profession in the first place." Jake shrugged. "I just said what I felt. Most people here seem a lot more qualified to have opinions about education. Experience matters more than qualifications sometimes," Elena replied. Another pause, then she added with studied casualness, "We're actually shorthanded for our weekend community garden project. Some of the raised beds need repair, and I heard you're good with tools." Jake blinked. "Who told you that?" Elena's smile turned slightly mysterious. "A certain 7th grader with pigtails and very strong opinions about breakfast burritos." Jake laughed, a sound that made something warm unfurl in Elena's chest. "I suppose I could take a look," he said. "As long as you don't expect miracles. I'm better with engines than gardens." "I have a feeling you're selling yourself short," Elena said, and something in her tone made Jake look at her more closely. "Saturday morning," he asked. "Saturday morning," she confirmed. As Jake and Sophia walked toward the school's exit, Elena stood in the doorway watching them go. Jake's motorcycle was parked under the streetlight, a well-maintained vintage Harley that looked like it had stories to tell. He helped Sophia with her helmet, double-checking the chin strap with the careful attention of someone who understood that precious things needed protection. For the first time in years, Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself looking forward to a Saturday morning work project. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Elena arrived at the school garden at 8 a.m. to find Jake's motorcycle already parked by the fence, its chrome catching the early sunlight. In the bed of a borrowed pickup truck, she could see lumber, a toolbox, and what looked like a thermos and paper bags. Apparently, Jake came prepared. She found him kneeling beside the furthest raised bed, already assessing the damage to the rotting corner boards. He'd traded his leather jacket for a faded flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms that spoke of years of honest work. "Started without me?" Elena called, walking over with her own coffee cup and a box of donuts from the local bakery. Jake looked up and smiled, the first truly relaxed smile she'd seen from him. "Old habit. I like to get a lay of the land before diving in." He gestured to the damaged planters. "Good news is most of this is cosmetic. Bad news is whoever built these originally didn't account for drainage." Elena knelt beside him, studying the problem with new eyes. "What do you recommend?" "Complete rebuild on 3 of them, reinforcement on the others. And we'll need to add proper drainage systems if you want these to last more than a couple seasons." As they worked side by side over the next few hours, Elena discovered that Jake was a natural teacher. He explained each step as if she were a student, not to condescend but out of habit, the patient tone of someone who believed everyone was capable of learning if given proper guidance. Their conversation flowed as easily as their work rhythm. Jake told her about inheriting his auto shop from his mentor, an old Italian mechanic who'd believed in second chances and fair prices. Elena spoke about her journey from high school English teacher to administrator, and how she'd fought to keep arts and music programs alive despite shrinking budgets. "You know," Jake said during a break, wiping sweat from his forehead, "Sophia's been different since she started here. More confident." Elena looked up from the board she was sanding. She's a remarkable girl. I can see where she gets her strength. Jake's expression grew serious. Some days I wonder if I'm enough. Raising a kid wasn't exactly in my life plan, especially not under these circumstances. From what I can see, Elena said gently, you're giving her exactly what she needs. Love, stability, and someone who shows up every day. Even when I show up late and covered in motor oil, Elena smiled. Especially then. Authenticity matters more than appearances. By noon, they'd completed 2 planter boxes and were starting on the 3rd. The autumn sun had warmed considerably, and Elena had traded her cardigan for a simple t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had loosened throughout the morning. Jake found himself stealing glances at this version of her, relaxed, laughing easily, sleeves pushed up and dirt under her fingernails. You know, Elena said as they cleaned up their tools, there's a harvest festival downtown tonight. Live music, local vendors, decent food trucks. Sophia mentioned she's never been to one. Jake raised an eyebrow. Is that an official school event? Elena's cheeks colored slightly. More like a community recommendation. Well, Jake said, shouldering his toolbox, Sophia does love funnel cake and terrible folk music. We might have to check it out. You might, Elena agreed, trying to sound casual despite the flutter in her chest. As Jake loaded his tools into the truck, Elena stood by the garden gate, arms folded, watching him work. There was something about the efficient way he moved, the care he took with even the smallest details, that made her think of craftsmanship as an art form. Elena, Jake's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Yes, thanks for today. I haven't had a project partner in a long time. Thank you for sharing your expertise. These gardens are going to feed a lot of families. Jake nodded, climbing into the truck. See you tonight? We'll see, Elena said, but she was already planning what to wear. The Riverside Harvest Festival had transformed the town square into something magical. String lights crisscrossed between the old oak trees, their warm glow reflecting off the fallen leaves scattered across the brick pathways. Local bands played on a small stage near the fountain. Food trucks lined the park's perimeter, and families wandered between booths selling handmade crafts and seasonal produce. Elena arrived just as the sun was setting, wearing a rust-colored sweater and dark jeans, casual but carefully chosen. She'd told herself she was just supporting the community, but her heart rate picked up when she spotted Jake's familiar silhouette near the apple cider stand. He was easy to find in the crowd, standing head and shoulders above most people, Sophia beside him holding what appeared to be the largest caramel apple Elena had ever seen. Dr. Vasquez. Sophia called out, waving enthusiastically. Look what Uncle Jake got me. Elena approached their small group, noting how Jake's face lit up when he saw her. That's quite an impressive apple, she said solemnly to Sophia. I hope you have a battle plan for conquering it. Sophia giggled. Uncle Jake says I need to approach it systematically. Sound advice, Elena replied, glancing at Jake. Your uncle seems to know something about systematic approaches. Jake's smile was slightly shy. Can I get you something? The hot chocolate here is supposedly legendary. I'd like that, Elena said. As Sophia ran off to join a group of her classmates by the petting zoo, Jake and Elena found themselves walking slowly through the festival grounds. The evening air was crisp but comfortable, filled with the sounds of laughter, fiddle music, and the distant bleating of goats. I have to ask, Elena said as they paused by a booth selling handmade pottery, how did you end up with Sophia? If you don't mind me asking. Jake's expression grew thoughtful. My sister Maria was a single mom. Sophia's dad left when she was 3. Couldn't handle the responsibility. Maria and I were close, especially after our parents died. He paused, watching Sophia laugh with her friends. When Maria was killed by a drunk driver 8 months ago, Sophia had nowhere else to go. I was listed as her guardian in Maria's will. Elena felt her heart clench. That must have been devastating for both of you. The hardest thing I've ever been through, Jake admitted. I went from bachelor mechanic to single dad overnight. Some days I still feel like I'm faking it. But you stepped up, Elena observed. Not everyone would have. Jake shrugged. She's family. That's what you do for family. They continued walking, their conversation flowing easily from serious topics to lighter ones. Elena told him about her own journey, her ex-husband who'd left when her career demands became too much, her decision to focus on education rather than starting a family of her own. Do you ever regret it? Jake asked. Not having kids? Elena considered the question carefully. I used to think I did. But working with students like Sophia, I think I've found my way to make a difference in young lives, just differently than I originally planned. Sophia adores you, Jake said. She comes home talking about your morning announcements, your book recommendations, how you remember everyone's names. She's special, Elena replied. You both are. They found a bench near the fountain, sharing a bag of kettle corn and watching the festival wind down around them. The string lights created a warm canopy overhead, and Elena found herself studying Jake's profile in the gentle glow. Can I ask you something? She said. Shoot. What made you speak up at the school board meeting? You seemed, well, like public speaking isn't your favorite thing. Jake laughed softly. It's not. But listening to that guy drone on about test scores, seeing Sophia get tense beside me, I just couldn't sit there anymore. These kids aren't data points. They're people. They deserve advocates who see them as individuals. Elena felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition, a resonance. That's exactly why I became an educator. Their eyes met and held, the noise of the festival fading into background. In that moment, Elena saw not the rough-around-the-edges mechanic who'd walked late into her meeting, but a man of deep conviction and gentle strength. And Jake saw not the polished professional he'd initially found intimidating, but a woman whose passion for her work came from the same place as his love for Sophia, a fundamental belief that people mattered. Elena, Jake began, his voice soft. Uncle Jake. Sophia's voice cut through the moment as she bounded toward them, sticky fingers and all. The band is playing again. Can we dance? Jake looked at Elena apologetically, but she just smiled. I think that sounds perfect, she said, standing and offering her hand to Sophia. Shall we show your uncle how it's done? And under the harvest moon, with string lights twinkling overhead and the sound of fiddles filling the air, three people who'd found each other unexpectedly began to look like something that might eventually become a family. The first whisper started on a Tuesday morning, just after the second bell. Mrs. Patterson, the PTA president, leaned over to Mrs. Coleman by the main office copy machine and said, Did you see Elena Vasquez at the Harvest Festival with that motorcycle man? By third period, the whisper had grown legs. By lunch, it had sprouted wings. And by the final bell, it had woven itself through the halls of Riverside Middle School like smoke through a screen door, impossible to contain and leaving everything it touched slightly tainted. Elena felt it in the subtle shift of conversations when she entered the teacher's lounge, in the way certain parents' smiles seemed just a fraction less warm, in the pointed questions about maintaining professional boundaries that came up during her meeting with the superintendent. She tried to dismiss it at first. Small towns talked. That was simply the way of things. But it became harder to ignore when she overheard a teacher mutter, "He's not exactly our type of people," as she passed the faculty bathroom, or when the school board chair sent her a carefully worded email about the importance of community perception in leadership roles. Elena had worked too hard and too long to build her reputation to let gossip derail her now. But the weight of constant scrutiny was exhausting. On Thursday evening, Jake arrived at the school with a handmade wooden magazine rack he'd crafted for the library, a surprise project he'd been working on in his spare time. The piece was beautiful, made from reclaimed oak with intricate corner joints that spoke of both skill and patience. Elena met him by the main entrance, but something in her demeanor was different. Her smile was tight, professional rather than warm. "This is beautiful," she said, accepting the magazine rack with careful formality. "The students will appreciate it." Jake studied her face, noting the tension around her eyes. "Everything okay?" Elena glanced around the empty hallway. "Can we talk outside?" They sat on the school's front steps, the evening air crisp with the promise of winter. Elena kept her hands folded in her lap, her posture rigid. There's been some talk, she began carefully. Jake nodded slowly. About us. About us, she confirmed. About whether it's appropriate for the principal to be involved with someone like... She stopped herself, but the damage was done. Someone like me, Jake finished quietly. Elena's shoulders sagged. I didn't mean it that way. But that's what they're saying. That I'm not good enough for you. That I don't belong in your world. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Elena thought about her career, the respect she'd fought to earn, the programs she still wanted to implement. Jake thought about Sophia, about the looks they'd gotten at the festival, about the familiar feeling of being judged for who he was rather than what he offered. I've worked so hard to get where I am, Elena said finally. This school, these kids, they're everything to me. I can't afford to lose their trust. Jake stood slowly, his expression carefully neutral. I understand. Jake, please. No, you're right, he said, but his voice carried an edge of hurt he couldn't quite hide. You've got a reputation to protect. I get it. He walked toward his motorcycle, leaving Elena sitting on the steps with a beautiful piece of handcrafted furniture and the growing realization that she might have just made the biggest mistake of her life. Sophia noticed the change immediately. Her uncle had always been quiet, but this was different, a heaviness that seemed to settle over him like a gray cloud. He still helped her with homework, still made her breakfast, still asked about her day. But the easy laughter was gone, replaced by a careful politeness that felt like a wall between them. Did something happen with Dr. Vasquez? Sophia asked one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Jake paused in his dishwashing. What makes you ask that? She seems sad at school. And you seem sad at home. And you both were happy before. The simple honesty of a 12-year-old cut deeper than any adult criticism could have. Jake dried his hands and sat down beside his niece. Sometimes grown-ups make things complicated, he said. Because of what people are saying? Sophia asked. Jake looked at her sharply. What people? Sophia shrugged. Kids hear things. Some of the parents think you're not good enough for her. She paused, then added with the fierce loyalty of youth. They're stupid. Sophia. They are. You're the best person I know. If they can't see that, they're stupid. Jake pulled her into a hug, his throat tight. Thanks, kiddo. Are you going to fight for her? Sophia asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. It's not that simple. It is that simple, Sophia said, pulling back to look at him. Do you love her? The question hung in the air between them. Jake hadn't allowed himself to think about it in those terms, hadn't let himself hope for something that seemed so far outside his reach. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I do. Then fight for her. Meanwhile, Elena was discovering that getting what she thought she wanted, professional distance and community approval, felt hollow and bitter. The whispers had died down, but the silence that replaced them was worse. She went through the motions of her days, attending meetings, reviewing budgets, observing classes, but everything felt muted and gray. She found herself staying late at school, not because she had work to do, but because her empty house felt too quiet. She'd drive past Jake's auto shop on her way home, never stopping but always slowing down, hoping for a glimpse of him. The breaking point came during a PTA meeting 3 weeks later. Mrs. Patterson was holding court near the refreshment table, her voice carrying across the room. Really, I think Elena showed poor judgment, she was saying to a small group of nodding heads. A woman in her position needs to be more careful about appearances. Dating someone like that mechanic sends the wrong message about our school standards. Elena stood frozen in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, listening to her personal life being dissected like a budget line item. He's not even educated, another parent chimed in. What does a man like that have in common with a professional woman? More than you might think, Elena said quietly, stepping into the room. The conversation stopped abruptly, faces turning toward her with expressions ranging from embarrassment to defiance. I'm sorry you had to hear that, Mrs. Patterson said, not sounding sorry at all. No, Elena replied, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate care. I'm sorry I've been listening to it for weeks without saying anything. She looked around the room. making eye contact with each person. Jake Martinez is one of the most honorable men I've ever met. He's raising his niece with more love and dedication than many people show their biological children. He volunteers his time and skills to help this community without expecting anything in return. And he sees education the way it should be seen, as something that nurtures the whole child, not just test scores. The room was silent now, tension thick as morning fog. If you think his background makes him less worthy of respect, then you're measuring worth by all the wrong standards, Elena continued. And if you think my personal life reflects poorly on this school, then you don't know me at all. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door, pausing only to add, I've spent 3 weeks being ashamed of something that was the best thing to happen to me in years. I won't make that mistake again. Elena found Jake in his shop just after closing time, working alone under the hood of an old Camaro. The overhead fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved that spoke of someone trying to lose himself in familiar work. She knocked on the open bay door. Jake. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before settling into careful neutrality. Elena, what brings you here? She stepped into the shop, inhaling the familiar scent of motor oil and metal. I came to apologize. Jake straightened, wiping his hands on a shop rag. You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I owe you an explanation, an apology, and the truth. Jake leaned against the workbench, waiting. I was scared, Elena began. I spent so many years building my career, proving myself in a male-dominated field, fighting for respect. When people started talking, I panicked. I thought I had to choose between my professional life and my personal happiness. And you chose your career, Jake said quietly. I thought I did. But these past few weeks have shown me that a career without someone to share it with isn't much of a life. She took a step closer. I was wrong, Jake. Not just about us, but about what really matters. Jake studied her face, looking for any sign of uncertainty. What changed? Elena smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn in weeks. Tonight I told the PDA exactly what I thought of their opinions. I may have also mentioned that you're one of the most honorable men I've ever met, and that anyone who judges you by your collar instead of your character is measuring worth by all the wrong standards. Jake's eyebrows rose. You said that to the PDA? I said that and more. I may have burned some bridges tonight, but they weren't bridges worth keeping. They stood in silence for a moment, the space between them electric with possibility. Elena, Jake said finally, I need you to be sure. I can't go through losing you again. I'm sure, she said, closing the distance between them. I love you, Jake Martinez. I love your integrity, your gentleness with Sophia, the way you see straight to the heart of things. I love that you show up always even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Jake's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. I love you too, he said. I have since that first night when you made me feel like I belong somewhere. When he kissed her, it tasted like forgiveness and new beginnings, like promises and possibilities. And in the background, barely audible over the hum of the shop lights, Sophia's voice drifted from the office doorway. Finally, I was wondering how long you two were going to be stubborn about this. They broke apart, laughing, to find Sophia grinning at them from where she'd been supposedly doing homework. How long have you been there? Jake asked. Long enough to know that Dr. Vasquez finally came to her senses. Sophia replied matter-of-factly. Also long enough to know that you're both terrible at this romance stuff. Good thing you have me to help. Elena laughed, the sound bright and free. Is that so? Sophia nodded solemnly. Uncle Jake's been moping for weeks. And you've been walking around school like someone stole your favorite book. It was painful to watch. Jake slung an arm around Elena's shoulders, pulling her close. Well, what do you suggest we do now, oh wise one? Sophia grinned. Now we celebrate. And then we plan the wedding, because I've been working on ideas. Elena blinked. Wedding? Oh, you're getting married, Sophia said with absolute certainty. I can tell by the way you look at each other. Plus, I want a mom, and Dr. Vasquez is perfect. She already knows how to handle difficult teenagers. I'm not a teenager yet, Jake pointed out. You act like one sometimes, Sophia shot back, making Elena laugh again. And standing in that auto shop, surrounded by the tools of honest work and the smell of possibility, Elena realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the most unexpected places, with the courage to be vulnerable, the wisdom to recognize what really matters, and the grace to accept the love that's been waiting patiently for you to be ready to receive it. Spring arrived early in Riverside, bringing with it the soft green promise of new beginnings. Elena stood in the doorway of Jake's shop, watching him work on Sophia's science project, a miniature wind turbine that would hopefully generate enough electricity to power a small LED light. The angle of the blades needs to be just right, Jake was explaining, his patient teaching voice in full effect. Too shallow and they won't catch enough wind. Too steep and the resistance will stop them from turning. Sophia nodded solemnly, making careful adjustments with a small screwdriver. At 13 now, she'd grown into her confidence, becoming the kind of student who asked thoughtful questions and wasn't afraid to advocate for herself or her classmates. There, Sophia said, stepping back to admire their work. Think it'll work? Only one way to find out, Jake replied, carrying the project outside to where a gentle breeze was stirring the spring air. Elena followed them, coffee mug in hand, content to watch this easy interaction between uncle and niece. It still amazed her how naturally they'd created a family unit, two people thrown together by tragedy who'd found in each other exactly what they needed. The wind turbine spun slowly at first, then faster as the breeze picked up and the tiny LED light flickered to life. It works, Sophia exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. It does indeed, Elena said, wrapping an arm around Sophia's shoulders. Your physics teacher is going to be impressed. Uncle Jake did most of the work, Sophia said generously. I did not, Jake protested. I just held things steady while you figured out the engineering. Elena smiled, watching them playfully argue about who deserved more credit. This was her life now. Sunday morning science projects, debate over breakfast about whether pancakes or French toast were superior, the comfortable rhythm of a family that had chosen each other. The past 6 months hadn't been without challenges. There had been awkward meetings with parents who were still adjusting to their principal's unconventional relationship, budget meetings where Jake's presence as Elena's partner was met with subtle disapproval, and moments when Elena questioned whether she was asking too much of both Jake and Sophia by dragging them into her professional world. But there had also been victories. Sophia's grades had improved dramatically, her confidence blooming under the steady attention of two adults who believed in her potential. The community garden project had expanded, with Jake now officially serving as the volunteer coordinator for maintenance and repairs. And Elena had discovered that having someone who loved her exactly as she was made her better at everything else, more patient with difficult parents, more creative in her problem solving, more willing to take risks that might benefit her students. I have something for both of you, Jake said, walking back toward the shop. He returned with a small wooden box, carved with intricate detail and finished to a warm honey color. Elena recognized the craftsmanship immediately. Jake, this is beautiful. Open it, Sophia urged, practically bouncing with excitement. Inside the box, nestled in soft velvet, were 2 matching pendants, delicate silver chains with small charms that looked like tiny wind turbines, the blades designed to actually spin freely. I had them made by a jeweler in Portland, Jake said, suddenly looking nervous. I wanted you both to have something that reminded you that we're a team, that we build things together. Elena felt tears prick her eyes as she lifted one of the necklaces. Jake, is this your way of asking Dr. Vasquez to marry you? Sophia asked with typical directness. Jake's face flushed. Well, I was hoping to be a little more subtle about it. Subtle is overrated, Elena said, clasping the chain around her neck. But yes, Jake Martinez. If you're asking, the answer is yes. Sophia whooped with joy, throwing her arms around both of them. Finally. I was starting to think I'd have to plan the whole thing myself. Who says you won't? Elena asked, laughing through her tears. I have a feeling you're going to have very strong opinions about wedding planning. I already have a list, Sophia confessed. It's in my room. Jake shook his head, but he was grinning. Of course you do. That evening, as they sat on the porch of Elena's house, their house now, Jake and Sophia having moved in the month before, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of rose and gold, Elena reflected on how differently her life had turned out than she'd planned. She'd thought success meant climbing the professional ladder alone, maintaining careful control over every aspect of her world. She'd never imagined that her greatest achievement would be this, a family built from unexpected circumstances, a love that had grown in the spaces between her carefully laid plans. What are you thinking about? Jake asked, settling beside her on the porch swing while Sophia chased fireflies in the yard. Just all of it, Elena replied, leaning into his warmth. How none of this was what I expected my life to look like, but somehow it's exactly what I needed. Jake's arm tightened around her. Having second thoughts? Never, Elena said firmly. I'm having first thoughts about a lot of things, though. Like whether we want to expand this family eventually. Jake went very still. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying that watching you with Sophia made me realize I might want to try the whole parenting thing from the beginning sometime. If you're interested. Jake turned to look at her, his eyes bright with possibility. Elena Vasquez, are you proposing to have my babies? She laughed. I'm proposing to marry you first, then see what happens. I love you, Jake said, kissing her temple. I love this life we're building. I love you too, Elena replied. All of you. Every unexpected, wonderful piece of this. And as the stars began to appear overhead and Sophia's laughter rang through the evening air, Elena knew that sometimes the best stories begin not with a plan, but with the courage to say yes to the unexpected, to love that arrives in work boots and flannel, to families that form in the spaces between loss and hope, and to the beautiful chaos of building something new from the pieces of who you used to be. The gymnasium at Riverside Middle School had been transformed into something magical. White fabric draped from the basketball hoops, thousands of tiny white lights twinkled from every available surface, and the center court had been covered with a dance floor surrounded by round tables decorated with simple centerpieces of wildflowers and candles. Elena stood in the teacher's lounge, now makeshift bridal suite, adjusting the simple silver pendant Jake had given her months ago. Her dress was elegant but unpretentious, a flowing cream-colored gown with lace sleeves that had belonged to her grandmother, altered to fit perfectly. Her dark hair was swept up in a loose chignon, and she wore the earrings Jake had surprised her with that morning, tiny silver wind turbines that caught the light when she moved. You look perfect, Sophia said, appearing in the doorway wearing a soft blue dress that perfectly complemented her role as maid of honor. At 13, she'd grown into herself, confident and poised, but still young enough to be excited about the celebration ahead. Thank you, sweetheart, Elena replied, turning to face her soon-to-be stepdaughter. Are you ready for this? Sophia grinned. I've been ready since that first night at the Harvest Festival when you two were making moon eyes at each other. Elena laughed. Moon eyes. Don't deny it. You were both so obvious. Sophia's expression grew more serious. But really, Dr. V. Elena, I'm so happy. Uncle Jake has been different since he met you. Lighter, you know? And I've never had a mom before. I'm excited about that. Elena felt tears threaten and blinked them back carefully. I'm excited about that too. About all of it. A gentle knock at the door announced the arrival of Elena's sister Carmen, who'd flown in from Denver to serve as matron of honor. The groom is pacing like a caged animal, Carmen reported with amusement. I think it's time. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. Jake stood at the front of the gym wearing a dark gray suit that somehow managed to look both formal and perfectly him. His best man was Tommy Rodriguez, his childhood friend who now ran the local hardware store, and the officiant was Judge Patricia Williams, a family friend who'd agreed to perform the ceremony. The guests were an eclectic mix. Teachers and school staff, parents and students, neighbors and friends from the auto shop, Sophia's classmates who'd been given special permission to attend. Even some of the PTA members who'd initially been critical of the relationship were there, having gradually come around as they'd seen how happy Jake made Elena and how positively Sophia had responded to having two stable adults in her life. When the simple wedding march began, played on the school's old piano by Mrs. Chen, the music teacher, Elena walked down the makeshift aisle feeling like she was exactly where she belonged. Her eyes found Jake's immediately, and the nervous expression on his face melted into pure joy. Sophia walked beside Elena, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers and beaming with pride. She'd insisted on this arrangement, saying that since she was responsible for bringing them together, she should be part of bringing them to the altar. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Jake and Elena had written their own vows, speaking from the heart about second chances, unexpected love, and the family they'd built together. "Elena," Jake said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "you taught me that love doesn't always look like what we expect it to. You saw past the rough edges to something worth loving, and you gave me the courage to be more than I thought I could be. I promise to support your dreams, to share your burdens, and to love you and Sophia with everything I have." Elena's voice was clear and strong as she replied, "Jake, you showed me that authenticity matters more than appearances, that strength comes in many forms, and that the best families are sometimes the ones we choose. You and Sophia have made my life fuller and richer than I ever imagined possible. I promise to love you both, to build something beautiful with you, and to never forget that the best things in life are worth fighting for." When Judge Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the gymnasium erupted in applause. Jake's kiss was gentle and filled with promise, and when they turned to face their guests, Sophia threw her arms around both of them, creating a group hug that brought tears to half the eyes in the room. The reception was held right there in the decorated gym, with a local caterer providing comfort food that everyone could enjoy. The wedding cake was a simple 3-layer vanilla cake with buttercream frosting, decorated with fresh flowers, exactly what Elena had requested. Jake and Elena's first dance was to At Last by Etta James, chosen because Elena had mentioned once that it was her favorite song about finding love later in life. As they swayed together on the makeshift dance floor, Jake whispered in her ear, "No regrets. Only that it took us so long to get here," Elena whispered back. Later in the evening, as the celebration wound down and guests began to filter out into the warm spring night, Jake found Elena standing at the edge of the dance floor, watching Sophia dance with her new school friends. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. "Just all of it," Elena replied, leaning back against his chest. "A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be married to a motorcycle mechanic in a middle school gymnasium, I'd have thought they were crazy. And now," Elena turned in his arms, looking up at his face, this man who'd become her partner, her best friend, her family. "Now I think it's the most perfect wedding I could have imagined. Even in a gym? Especially in a gym. This is where we met, where we first saw each other. It's fitting that it's where we started our marriage too." Jake smiled, spinning her once as the music played. "So what happens now, Mrs. Martinez?" Elena grinned at the sound of her new name. "Now we go home, tuck our daughter into bed, and start the next chapter of our story." "Our daughter," Jake repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." "Me too," Elena said. "Me too." And as they danced together in the soft light of 1,000 tiny bulbs, surrounded by the people who'd supported them through doubt and criticism to arrive at this moment of pure joy, Elena knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that begin in the most ordinary places, with two people brave enough to see past appearances to the heart of what really matters, patient enough to build something lasting, and wise enough to know that the best families are forged not just by blood, but by choice, commitment, and love. The sound of power tools and laughter echoed from the backyard of the Martinez house on a Saturday morning in late spring. Elena sat on the back porch, coffee mug in hand, watching her husband and daughter work together on their latest project, an elaborate tree house that had been Sophia's 16th birthday request. "The support beam needs to be level soft," Jake called from his position halfway up the oak tree. I know," Sophia replied with the patience of someone who'd learned construction skills from a master craftsman. Just hold it steady while I get the measurement. Elena smiled, marveling at how much had changed and how much had remained wonderfully the same. Sophia was now a confident high school junior, active in student government and the robotics club, with plans to study engineering in college. She'd grown into a young woman who spoke her mind, stood up for others, and approached challenges with the same methodical problem-solving skills Jake had taught her. Elena herself had been promoted to district superintendent the year before, a position that allowed her to implement some of the educational reforms she'd been passionate about for years. The community garden project had expanded to include 3 schools, and Jake had been hired as the official facilities coordinator, a role that let him use his skills to benefit students while maintaining his auto shop. The biggest change, though, was the one Elena was still adjusting to. She placed her hand on her slightly rounded belly, feeling the flutter of movement that had become familiar over the past few months. At 38, she'd worried about the risks of pregnancy, but Jake had been nothing but supportive, and Sophia had been over the moon at the prospect of being a big sister. "How's the construction crew doing?" Elena called. "Perfect," Sophia replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Though Dad keeps wanting to over-engineer everything. It's a treehouse, not a space station." "Hey," Jake protested, climbing down from the tree. "If we're going to build something, we're going to build it right. This treehouse is going to outlast all of us." Elena laughed. "That might be overkill for something that will probably only be used for a few years." Jake and Sophia exchanged a look. "Actually," Sophia said, "we were kind of hoping it might get used a little longer than that." She gestured to Elena's belly. "Future Martinez needs somewhere to play, right?" Elena felt her heart swell with love for these 2 people who'd thought ahead to include the baby in their planning. Future Martinez is very lucky to have such thoughtful family members. Future Martinez is also very lucky to have parents who know how to build things that last, Jake added, settling beside Elena on the porch steps. "Speaking of which, how are you feeling?" "Good," Elena replied honestly. "Tired, but good. Dr. Peterson says everything looks perfect." Sophia bounded over to join them, still energetic despite the morning's work. "I can't wait to meet him. Or her." "When do we find out?" "We're not going to," Elena said. "We decided we want to be surprised." "Old-fashioned," Sophia teased. "I like it." Jake slipped his arm around Elena's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, watching their daughter sketch plans for treehouse furniture in the dirt with a stick. This was her life now. Saturday morning construction projects, family dinners where everyone shared the best and worst parts of their day, quiet evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. "Any regrets?" Jake asked softly, echoing the question he'd asked on their wedding day. Elena looked around at the backyard scattered with tools and lumber, at Sophia planning her next engineering project, at the man beside her who'd shown her that love could be both steady and surprising. "Not a single one," she said. "This is exactly the life I never knew I wanted." "Good," Jake replied, kissing the top of her head. "Because I'm thinking we might need to expand the treehouse. Make it a duplex." Elena laughed. "Planning ahead, are we?" "Always," Jake said. "That's what families do. We build for the future." And as the spring sun climbed higher in the sky and Sophia called for help with the next phase of construction, Elena thought about how love had a way of reshaping everything you thought you knew about your own story. She'd started as a woman who valued control and careful planning, and she'd learned that the most beautiful things in life often came from saying yes to the unexpected, to love that arrived in work boots, to families that formed in the spaces between loss and hope, and to the endless possibility of building something new. Something lasting, something worth fighting for. The treehouse would be finished by summer, ready for the adventures that lay ahead. And Elena knew that whatever came next, sleepless nights with a newborn, teenage drama, the challenges and joys of raising children in an ever-changing world, they would face it together. This family they'd chosen and built and loved into being. Some love stories begin with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. But the best ones, Elena had learned, begin with small moments of connection, grow through daily acts of showing up, and flourish in the quiet spaces where 2 people choose again and again to build something beautiful together. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, Those love stories include the sound of power tools on Saturday mornings, the laughter of children who feel safe enough to dream big, and the steady warmth of someone who sees you exactly as you are and loves you not in spite of your imperfections, but because of the whole complicated, beautiful truth of who you are. The most beautiful love stories aren't the ones that follow a script. They're the ones that teach us to write our own. The end. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my video. Commenting and subscribing just takes 2 seconds of your time, but it makes our day and give us motivation to keep uploading more interesting stories.